on since October 7th in Gaza, and that's the conflict against Hamas. And then there's the conflict in Lebanon, which of course involves Hezbollah. And then there's the conflict involving Iran. And all three of these conflicts are very dangerous conflicts. But at this point in time, it appears to me that the most dangerous of those three conflicts is the Iran-Israeli conflict because of what happened on October 1st. I think the potential for escalation is great there. I think the situation in Lebanon is really dire, and it would be wonderful if we could put an end to it, which we won't do. But I think the possibility of escalation there is not as great as it is with regard to Iran.
So we'll get to Iran in obviously just a little bit, and I entirely agree that that's the most dangerous component of this. But let's just stick to Lebanon for a moment. For a long time, we've been hearing about this massive stockpile of precision, long-range weapons, or at least weapons that can reach deep into Israel, that Hezbollah has and is able to use. And we've seen them use some of that, nowhere near their full capacity. But now what we're seeing as well is some kind of a ground invasion on the part of the Israeli military into Lebanon. And the last time this happened in 2006, it was a very bloody, difficult, protracted war for Israel. And it seems like already in just the first 2 or 3 days, we've seen a good number of IDF soldiers killed. Just in terms of the part of this which has become the ground invasion into Lebanon, how extensive do you think that's likely to go, and how difficult do you think that will be for Israel?
Well, let me just make one sort of preparatory point before I answer that. The Israelis are pursuing 3 different strategies towards Hezbollah. One is the decapitation strategy, where they killed Nasrallah, and that's not going to work. The second is the punishment strategy, where they're basically murdering huge numbers of civilians or forcing them out of their homes, and that's not going to work. And therefore, it's not surprising that they're talking about, or they've executed, a ground invasion. What's interesting about it is there's hardly any news on what's going on. I searched all the Israeli newspapers that I read today to see if I could get some sense of what's going on, and it's very hard to find anything. Yesterday, there were all sorts of stories that an Israeli force in Lebanon had been ambushed, and there were 8 killed. 8 IDF soldiers were killed, and there were many wounded soldiers. And this, of course, is what we expected, because the IDF was going into a hornet's nest, number one. And number two, the IDF is basically exhausted from the Gaza campaign. So it wasn't surprising to see that they had all this trouble right off the bat. But if you look at the newspapers today in Israel and even in the West, there's just hardly any news. And as you and I both know, if the Israelis were making significant progress, we'd be hearing about it. And the fact that we're not hearing anything makes me think that they're already in deep trouble, which I would not find surprising. I'm not saying that's the case. But you see, the problem that the Israelis have, again, is decapitation doesn't work, punishment doesn't work, and now a ground invasion doesn't work. So where does that leave them? It leaves them facing facing Hezbollah. And this Hezbollah is capable of still firing rockets into Israel. By most accounts, they launched 150 rockets into northern Israel yesterday, and they launched 130 rockets into northern Israel today. So the idea that Israel is silencing Hezbollah or is on the verge of defeating Hezbollah is simply not true.
I think the interesting part of what you said about the Israeli media report is that pretty much every Israeli media report is under very strict censorship. In fact, when you had a terrorist attack in Jaffa in Tel Aviv, and it was only about 12 hours later when the Israeli media began to report on the number of victims, their names, and when they did so, they basically said, we're able to report this because the government has cleared this for publication, meaning they decided that they were going to allow us to publish this information. Yesterday, as you said, there was clear reports in the Israeli press that there was an ambush and 8 IDF soldiers were killed. I think they confirmed one more death today. And you have a lot of news reports from Lebanese media, from regional media, from Al Jazeera, from informal channels like Telegram, and even from Twitter, that are suggesting that there's a lot more damage to the IDF already imposed than the Israeli military has, or the Israeli press has been able to report. But let me ask you this argument that you made where you said decapitation doesn't work. I think a lot of people believed that when they started with that pager attack and the walkie-talkies that made everyone so excited about the genius of this attack, followed by the killing of Nasrallah and other top leaders of Hezbollah, I think a lot of people felt like, well, if you decapitate the leadership of Hezbollah and you render their communication devices unusable because they're now weapons in the hands of the Israelis, that of course you're going to hamper Hezbollah to a significant extent. Why isn't that true?
Well, first of all, just on decapitation, we have a rich literature in the international relations scholarly world that shows that decapitation simply doesn't work. And some of the best evidence that it doesn't work comes from the Israeli case. The Israelis have been running around the Middle East assassinating leaders for a long, long time. And it's never had any significant consequences. And you kill Nasrallah, somebody will come in and replace him. And when they killed Nasrallah's predecessor in 1992 and Nasrallah came in, the end result was they got a more effective leader. And you may get an even more effective leader or an equally effective leader this time. So just, decapitating, knocking off the head of an organization like Hezbollah is not going to fundamentally change the nature of the situation. They're still going to have 40,000 fighters who are well positioned and well prepared to take on the Israelis and who have many, many thousands of rockets and missiles that they can fire at Israel. So, the decapitation strategy just doesn't work. What you have to do is you have to go in and you have to degrade those Hezbollah fighting forces in southern Lebanon. You have to eradicate them. Look, just go to Gaza for a second. As you know, they've been fighting against Hamas for a very, very long time. And their goal, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, has been to decisively defeat Hamas. They have not decisively defeated Hamas. They have not even come close. Well, if they didn't defeat Hamas, they're certainly not going to defeat Hezbollah. The terrain is much more advantageous to the defender in Lebanon than it is in Gaza. And furthermore, Hezbollah is much better armed and much better prepared than the fighters in Gaza are. So the Israelis are in a hopeless situation. They're not going to win